Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. The Grammys. I think everyone in the rock and metal scene can agree that the Grammys are not an award show to take seriously. Like at all. Despite it presenting itself as the most prestigious music award show that there is, time and time again, they've shown what is honestly an impressive amount of tone deafness when it comes to the rock and metal genres. You know, my last video was on Megadeth, and in it I mentioned briefly how Metallica is a sensitive subject for Dave Mustaine and how the two bands have had probably one of the biggest public rivalries in all of music. So get this, Megadeth has been nominated for the Grammys like 13 times, but have lost nearly all of them, quite often, to Metallica. They finally got their first and only win in 2017 when their song Dystopia won Best Metal Performance. It should be a night that Dave would always want to remember. And you want to know what song the Grammys played to welcome them on stage?
Emotional damage!
Wow, you know that had to sting. I don't know if I'm gonna get claimed for that, but f it, you needed to hear that. Seriously, props to Dave for keeping his cool about it. If I was on stage after all of that, my acceptance speech would just be me reciting all the words you can't say on TV. I have to be honest, this year's Grammys were the first I watched in a while. Even though I already know I should not really give a shit, there's always those moments when I see a niche band I love be nominated, and suddenly I find myself kind of rooting for them. That's exactly what happened when I saw Spiritbox was up for nomination this year. And not only that, but also that they were booked to actually perform at the Grammys. You gotta understand the context. This was the third year in a row that they've been nominated for Best Metal Performance. In 2024, they were nominated for their song Jaded off the Fear of Fear EP, and even though that song is in my opinion fucking awesome, they lost to Metallica 72 Seasons. Then they were nominated for it again in 2025 for their song Cellar Door, also on the Fear of Fear EP, and one of my personal favorites in the band altogether, but again, lost. This time to Mea Culpa. The song composed and performed by Gojira specifically for the opening ceremony of the 2024 Summer Olympics. This year they were nominated again for the song Soft Spine off their latest album Tsunami Sea, and honestly, when looking into it a bit more, I thought for sure that they were gonna get it this time. First of all, it felt like all the other nominees were roughly in the same level of popularity, but the fact that they were also set to perform their nominated song right before the ceremony, to me had to be a sign. So my guitarist Shock, also known as Willy Worm, and I hopped on a Discord call and we watched the live stream. First of all, Spiritbox f***ing killed it with their performance. Courtney LaPlante is our indisputable metal queen, burn any heathens who say otherwise. Shock and I were so ready for the award, and wouldn't you know it, Turnstile won.
Son of a bitch!
Okay, let me get this out of the way. I like Turnstile. I think they're a good band, and I enjoy Never Enough. They are not metal though. At best, they are hardcore punk. The song that they specifically won for, Birds, is admittedly heavier than most of the rest of the album, but it's still not something I would conventionally call a metal song, especially when compared to its competition. And that's what really pissed me off the most. At least in 2024 and 25, while I would have preferred Spiritbox to win either or maybe even both awards, I can at least objectively understand the choices the Academy did go with. Love them or hate them, but Metallica is unquestionably one of the biggest, most recognizable metal bands of all time. They're arguably the safest bet to win the Grammys. And with Gojira, that was again a song made for one of the biggest international competitions in the world. The fact that we got a band like them to perform at the opening ceremony was just a big win for the genre as a whole. But the rest of 2025 were huge for Spiritbox. They released Tsunami Sea that year, which brought them a ton more mainstream exposure than ever before. Big headlining tours, performing Soft Spine on Jimmy Kimmel, appearing on ABC. And before the year was even out, they had some great collaborations with Baby Metal with My Queen and Poppy and Amy Lee with The End of You. To have such an explosive year, which would then culminate in finally securing that Grammy win after losing twice, it felt like the perfect setup. It only adds to the frustration that at the end of the day, a non-metal band won the category. I was so baffled about it that I made a short about it the next day, and it blew up. People were commenting the exact same sentiment as I had, and it was when I was reading the comments that this one caught my attention. I remember something very similar happened back in like 2019 or something like that when Bring Me the Horizon were nominated for Best Rock Song Grammy for their song Mantra, and the award ended up going to a song by St. Vincent for what was essentially just an EDM song with some riffs thrown in. The other nominees were Ghost, 21 Pilots, and Greta Van Fleet. Gotta be honest, that one flew by me completely. I was not paying attention to the Grammys that year. But I made it no secret that Bring Me the Horizon are one of my favorite bands, and looking at the other nominees from that year, honestly, there's some solid competition. So for St. Vincent, an artist that I am barely aware of and have never listened to, beating all of them means that this song, Mass Seduction, would have to have been something nothing short of mind-blowing. I am going into this song completely blind, so let's take a listen to what is supposedly the best rock song of 2018.
One mass seduction later.
Okay, wow, dude, you were right on the money. Look, just like how I don't see Turnstile's Burrs as much of a metal song, I'm not quick to call Mass Seduction a rock song either. This is more of a synth pop song, if anything, with some distorted guitar thrown in every now and again. I can infer that it's trying to be more avant-garde, but that doesn't always make for an engaging listening experience. The intensity doesn't change all that much, and technically speaking, I didn't find too many elements at play here. Just the same basic synth and drum beat over and over again, vocals that are mostly monotone, and then just some sparse added guitar slides around the chorus. Compared this to Mantra, or really any of the other songs nominated that year, and they're way more livelier, catchier, overall just more fun to listen to. Now, before any of St. Vincent's 4 million Spotify listeners start planning on how they're gonna kidnap and crucify me, I don't think Mass Seduction is horrible or that I can't grow to appreciate it a bit more. I just don't think it being included in an award for Best Rock Song accurately reflects the type of song that it is or the award itself. I gave some of St. Vincent's other songs off the album a try, and there were ones like Los Angeles that I actually enjoyed. And not only that, but I also think that they make a lot more sense as a choice for Best Rock Song. At that point, I had to step back and ask, okay, how exactly are these decisions being made? The Academy says these awards aren't based on cultural relevance, which in this case would check out because all the other nominees smoke Mass Seduction out in terms of streams. So if it's not popularity and it's not strictly genre alignment, then what exactly are voters comparing? How do you objectively rank a synth-driven art rock song against metalcore? So I refreshed myself on the voting process. To keep it brief, the process starts with labels and music acts submitting recordings. Then there are some panels that screen them for eligibility and category placement. Then voting members, who are all reportedly industry professionals, cast ballots into 2 rounds. First to determine nominees, and then to decide winners. Now, I am not going to act like I know more than hundreds of industry professionals, but while reading the guidelines, there were some parts that really stood out to me. According to the Recording Academy, during those 2 rounds, voters are directed to vote only within their areas of expertise, which sounds reasonable on paper. But here's the other part that stood out to me. The screening process itself doesn't evaluate artistic or technical merit. It's just meant to determine whether a recording is eligible in the first place and what category it best belongs in. I have a problem with that. Like with what we just saw, a lot of the rock awards have had nominees spanning a huge range of styles. To the Grammys, rock can include everything from pop rock to indie, punk, alternative, or even metal. Styles with very different conventions and audiences. I feel at that point they're just putting artists that don't really belong in the same conversation against each other. Like you're putting Leonard Cohen up against nothing more in the same category in the same year. What the hell kind of sense does that make? And just because someone technically works within the rock space doesn't necessarily mean that they understand every corner of it. And when voters are asked to compare songs that sound nothing alike, it's hard to imagine how those decisions can be made without some level of personal preference creeping in, even unintentionally. Once I started thinking about it that way, I got curious and I started looking through all the lists and history of past rock winners. I was thinking I would find some calls I'd find controversial and I would bitch about them for a video. But the more I looked, the more I started noticing patterns. And at a certain point, it stopped feeling like a few weird or unlucky decisions and just started feeling like there are genuine structural problems with how the Grammys handle rock music in general. So today, we're gonna take a look at some of the Grammys' most baffling decisions and long-standing patterns when it comes to rock and metal, and why those choices have made the award show so hard for me and so many other people in the rock and metal community to take seriously. Let us begin. The first example that comes to a lot of people's minds was, ironically enough, the first year when the metal genre was officially recognized at the Grammys. In 1989, the Recording Academy had included the new category Best Hard Rock Metal Performance Vocal or Instrumental. God, that is a f***ing mouthful. Deciding to combine and treat both genres as one. Among the nominees were AC/DC, Jane's Addiction, Jethro Tull, Iggy Pop, and the fan favorite Metallica. Metallica was up for nomination for their latest album, And Justice for All, and by all accounts were the most expected to win. Just like Spiritbox, they even performed at the award show, which is why it came to a shock to everyone when the first ever Grammy Award for Best Hard Rock Metal Performance went to Jethro Tull and their album Crest of a Knave. Now, Crest of a Knave isn't a bad album. But if you think metal and your first instinct is a prog rock band who really like flutes, congratulations! The Recording Academy may have a job for you. This choice resulted in probably some of the worst public backlash the Grammys had ever gotten. Everyone was saying that Jethro Tull had no place being put into this category, even Jethro Tull themselves. In an interview, frontman Ian Anderson said, "They gave us the award because we were a bunch of nice guys who never won a Grammy before. I don't think anyone would possibly believe that Knave was a hard rock or heavy metal album." Just for some added context, the entire band thought it was so unlikely for them to win that none of them even attended the show. Metallica were understandably frustrated with it too, not just because they were also believed, wow, we just got robbed, but because according to Lars Ulrich, the record label was so sure that they were going to win that they had printed over 10,000 one-sheets that called And Justice for All a Grammy Award winner. You know someone at Elektra got fired that day. This is a f***ing throwback, but that exact situation was how the bad guys in Video Game High School lost. Even with the frustration, Metallica decided to make a joke out of it, having the stickers instead read, Grammy Award Loser. You know what? That's actually pretty funny. I couldn't find many photos of the sticker online, but I wonder if a lot of people kept those on 3.5 decades later. That honestly feels like a part of history at this point. Overall though, this was such an embarrassment for the Academy that they decided that starting next year, they would separate hard rock and metal into their own categories. Funny enough, if the next few ceremonies were anything to go by, I think they were trying to appease Metallica, as they would go on to win the Best Metal Performance Award for the next 3 years in a row. Their wins in 1990 and 92 make sense to me. Those were for the songs One and the Black Album respectively, but it's the award in 91 that had me scratching my head. For context, while up against Anthrax's Persistence in Time, Megadeth's Rust in Peace, and Judas Priest's Painkiller, Metallica won the Best Metal Performance for a cover of Queen's Stone Cold Crazy. Honestly, while going through all these lists of past winners, I was genuinely surprised by how often covers weren't just featured, but actually won. Metallica won a Grammy for another cover back in 2000, this time for Thin Lizzy's Whiskey in the Jar, which itself is a centuries-old Irish folk song. And just like their win in 91, it just was very surprising to me considering who they were up against. Also nominated were Nookie by Limp Bizkit and Freak on a Leash by Korn, and this was when nu metal was at its stride. For how big both of those songs were back then and are still now, it's just crazy to me that they got looked over. And if that wasn't enough, the nominees also included Get Born Again by Alice in Chains, one of the last recordings with Lane Staley. And if I wasn't depressed reading that, this next example definitely cements things. Motorhead are one of my all-time favorite bands, and are inarguably one of the most influential hard rock bands to ever be. Despite decades of groundbreaking music and 4 total nominations, the only time they have ever won a Grammy was in 2005 for a cover of Metallica's Whiplash. For anyone who doesn't know, Metallica have made it no secret that Motorhead have been a huge inspiration, even going as so far to say that they would not exist had it not been for Motorhead. The two groups have collaborated and performed together numerously, and after Lemmy's death in 2015, Metallica made a song called Murder One off Hardwired, which was a tribute to him. So for Motorhead's only Grammy win to come from covering Metallica rather than being recognized for their own original work just felt ironic to me. Especially because one of their other nominations was for a cover of Enter Sandman, so literally half of the time they've been nominated were for Metallica covers. Then in 2015, comedy rock band Tenacious D won Best Metal Performance with a cover of The Last in Line by Dio, beating out original music not just from Motorhead, but also Mastodon and Slipknot.
Son of a bitch!
You know, when Shock and I were watching this year's show, we also caught the Best Rock Performance, and the winner for that was Youngblood for his cover of Black Sabbath's Change that he did at Back to the Beginning. And let me tell you, my friend was pissed. Not because that there was another nominee he wanted to win, but more so because the idea that a cover winning arguably cheapens the award, and to be honest, I have to agree with him. I'm not gonna lie and say that I don't appreciate the passion and effort both Metallica, Youngblood, or all these other people put into their covers, far from it. There have been plenty of covers that were reworked so well that we forget sometimes that they're even covers. But personally, for as prestigious as the Grammys market themselves to be, I just don't think it's right to put them on the same playing field as original music. There is some creative merit in taking a pre-existing song and putting your own spin on it, but and I say this as someone who does music, it is significantly harder to compose something original. With a cover, no matter how far you go incorporating your own style into it, you're still working off a blueprint made by someone else. Stuff like lyrics, melodies, and chord progressions are usually kept the same, even in the famous covers, which, yeah, takes out a lot of the work in composing. So you're dealing with a situation where it's not like, oh, I don't know what the melody is going to be. It's more like, how can I make the melody of Sweet Dream sound creepy? Oh, I know, I'm gonna play it at a slower tempo. Also, a lot of the most popular covers are typically of songs that a lot of people are already familiar with. I think it's natural that they're just gonna get more attention. Look up any song on YouTube, and you're sure to find covers. Hell, the whole reason I Prevail first got popular was because they covered Blank Space. Their songs were already connected with, so it's exciting to see how other people change it up. And then when a cover is being done by an artist that is already big, yeah, I think it's just inevitable that there's just gonna be a lot more people that are a lot more invested in it. Even with all that said though, I'm not totally against the idea of covers being included in the Grammys. There are covers that I prefer over originals, but I think they ought to be limited to their own category. Have a best rock cover or even just a best cover category. They got general awards. I don't think anyone would complain about having it. Would also just give the chance for more original music to be promoted. You know what else doesn't really make sense for me? Live performances of old songs being up for nomination against studio releases. So, Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. You know it, I know it, literally everyone knows it. Nominated for Best Rock Song in '93. Take a f***ing guess who actually won. Eric Clapton for an unplugged live performance of Layla. This song came out in 1970. If it was a person, they would have been old enough to drink. And why place it in Best Rock Song instead of Best Rock Performance? According to the Academy, that distinction matters. So this is their online entry guidelines. This is where you can also see what makes a song eligible for what award. So under Best Rock Song, it states, a song must contain melody and lyrics and must be either a new song or a song first achieving prominence during the eligibility year. Songs containing prominent samples or interpolations are not eligible. So Layla definitely wasn't new, and as for prominence, the song had charted multiple times across multiple countries well before this acoustic version was released. And that end part, interpolations are not eligible. What that specifically means is that reusing existing material such as lyrics, melodies, or riffs or whatever into a new recording is not allowed. So let me ask this. If I'm playing the same melody and singing the same song lyrics in the exact same pattern, and the only difference is that I switch from electrical instruments to acoustic instruments, does that or does that not sound like an interpolation? And look, I get that when this came out, it was a big hit. That Unplugged album is the best-selling live album of all time. But according to the rules of the Grammys themselves, this shouldn't have even been in the running. At least not for Best Rock Song. This honestly would have been more appropriate in the performance category. But even then, I'm not entirely sold on the idea of songs that are decades old competing for new awards. And this isn't a one-off situation. In 2000, Black Sabbath won Best Metal Performance for a live version of Iron Man, a song that was already 30 years old at the time. 2 years later, they were nominated again for The Wizard, also from 1970, though that time they lost to Schism by Tool. If I was around back then and heard that Schism lost in 2002 to a song that is older than my dad, I would have rioted. And in 2010, Judas Priest got their only ever Grammy win for a live performance of their song Dissident Aggressor, which came out in 1977. I am just so conflicted about this. Let's go back to that entry process again for a sec. When it comes to performances, they all basically say for newly recorded performances. Now, I can understand that with that definition, you can include live performances to be considered. But this circles back to the same issues that I have with covers. Just like covers, these live songs to me have an advantage because there's an element of nostalgia to them. Way before they won their awards, songs like Iron Man and Layla were already considered some of the most iconic songs of all time by some of the most iconic musicians of all time. People have had so much more time to build an emotional connection to it, and because of that, I can't help but imagine that there's gotta be some voters who are like, oh, Iron Man is up? Yo, we gotta give it to them, it's Iron Man! Yeah, that Nine Inch Nails song was cool, but come on, it's not Iron Man! I didn't have any issues with Gojira winning in 2025 for Mea Culpa, but that was under different circumstances. Not only was that performed on one of the biggest platforms a metal band has ever had, both figuratively and literally, but it was also an entirely new song composed for that show specifically. And they still released the studio version of it like months before the next Grammys took place. But with all these examples of decades old songs winning, what exactly are we saying? If the award is purely about performance, okay, that's fine, I can get behind that. But then isn't it inherently unfair to put a brand new song up against some of the most historic tracks in all of music?
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
And you know what? I'm getting so frustrated because I feel like this could be such an easy fix. Why can't live performances just be their own separate category? We have awards for things as mundane as liner notes. Are live performances really less worthy of a dedicated spot? But this just brings me to a broader issue I've noticed while digging through these categories. They're either too broad or too vague. For example, this year, Turnstile received nominations for both Metal Performance and Best Alternative Performance for songs off the same album. I understand that albums and artists can blend genres, I love it when they do, but when the same act can comfortably sit in multiple major categories at once, it starts to raise questions about how clearly are these genre lines being defined. In past years, nominees within a single category for Best Alternative Performance have ranged from pop punk to goth rock to folk. Meanwhile, something like Best Rock Album this year already included everything from pop rock to full-on metal. It's the same issue I ran into with the Bring Me the Horizon St. Vincent example earlier. When the styles of songs being compared are this different, it's hard to see how anyone could objectively decide what the best rock song out of all of them are. When I first started putting this video together, I thought I was just going to point out a few questionable decisions, complain about them, crack some jokes, and move on. But this turned into something deeper for me. Between the vague category labels, the constant reshuffling and retiring of awards, and moments that just feel like straight up favoritism, I've come away with the impression that the Grammys aren't just flawed, they're structurally disorganized when it comes to rock. I already didn't have much respect for the award show because of how they treated the genres that I am particularly passionate about, but there was always some small part of me that hoped that they would get better. So I guess that would be the question now. How could things be better? I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I have all the answers for how an award show of this scale should operate. In my opinion, there's always gonna be some level of bias when you're judging something as subjective as music. But if I were redesigning the system, there are a few things that I would change which I feel like would make it easier for people like me to take it more seriously. First, I think genre categories should be a lot more clearly defined. Other genres already do this. Country has separate awards for traditional, contemporary, bluegrass, and Americana. Something similar could easily exist within rock, which would just make comparisons a lot more meaningful. And second, I feel like cultural impact should play at least some role in the conversation. If these awards are meant to recognize the most defining music of the last year, then it makes sense that it's the music that people are actually listening to. And then this final point I have, this is in regards to that claim about having hundreds of industry experts who are the ones who actually vote on all this stuff. If this is not the case already, I feel like there should be a certain amount of voters and experts per genre, making sure each and every one of them are properly represented, and I could just have some hope that the people who vote on these actually know what they're talking about. As it currently stands though, I'm pretty much done giving the Grammys my attention. If a band I like happens to perform, then sure, I'll probably still watch that. But I'm done treating the outcome of these awards as some kind of validation. Instead, what I'm gonna do, and what I think everyone ought to do, is just give that attention directly to the bands that we love, and keep supporting them. Listen to their music, buy their merch, and see them in concert. I know I have with Spiritbox. I went and saw them live when they came to New York City on their tour for Tsunami Sea, and it was incredible. You know what, here's a funny story. I accidentally purchased a balcony seat when I first bought my ticket online, and I didn't realize till I was literally inside the venue. And after sitting in my seat for 2 minutes, I was like, no, I need to be in the pit for this one. So I literally just bought another ticket on my phone right then and there, went back downstairs and got up right to the stage, and let me tell you, it was f***ing worth it. Getting to mosh the Holy Roller, euphoric. Again, all hail our queen. With that, we have come to the end. As always, I want to thank you again if you made it all the way. If you enjoyed today's video, please do consider liking, hyping, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Any and all of those really help it out. If you ever wanted to chat with me directly, please do consider joining my Discord, where you will also be the first to get all the latest updates on future projects and videos. Or you can let me know about any instances where you thought an artist got snubbed. I'd love to hear your thoughts either there or in the comments below, and I do hope to see you next time on my next video. Until then, take care.